Awesome. Friends, tonight for our education forum, we have three power-packed panelists who are educators in various different realms. We have Amy Brooks, she's a Howard County educator. We have Kelly Kleinfelter Lee, who is a Howard County educator also on the Howard Progressive Project. And we have Matthew Vaughn-Smith, who is an educator and also the president of the Anti-Racist Education Alliance. We've gotten this group of people together tonight to talk about this Board of Education race and the state of education here in Howard County. And so without further ado, I'm just going to call on our different panelists and ask them if they'll be so kind as to introduce themselves. We'll go in alphabetical order and we'll start with Ms. Brooks.
So what would you like to know? I've been teaching for 23 years in Baltimore City and now Howard County. In Howard County, I've taught at Lake Elkhorn and Oakland Mills. And I know how important the school board is and the daily impact that some of their decisions have on our kids. And I started OMO, a nonprofit, when our buildings closed, because I know our community is really strong and the love of learning runs very deep in Howard County. Was that good? Is that what you're thinking?
That was perfect.
And I have three Howard County kids, students. I have a college, a high school, and a middle schooler.
That was perfect. Thank you, Amy, and welcome. We're going to introduce Kelly Kleinfelter Lee.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Kelly. I've been an educator since 1991, Gulp. I've taught in the Chicago, Boston, Chelsea, Mass, Howard County, and Baltimore City schools, and I'm happy to be back in Howard County this year at Oakland Mills High School. I started in Howard County schools as a parent, and I founded Howard Progressive Project with a bunch of friends and awesome Howard County parents in the wake of redistricting. And, you know, we've deepened to deal with lots of other things, but we started as an education equity organization. That's really our founding idea. And it's what brought us together, education equity. And this race is really important because 2 of the 4 people who are running are dangerous for our children. There's my dog, and I have a lot more to say, and I'll get to that in a little while. But I have 2 kids who have graduated from Wild Lake High School and 1 who's still at Harper's.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Kelly. And also, we now have Mr. Matthew Vaughn-Smith. If you will unmute and introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this panel with these illustrious educators. My name is Matthew Vaughn-Smith again. I am an educator going on 15 years. Woo, woo. Yeah, I started in 08. I was a Howard County educator for 12 years. I am now an educator in Montgomery County as an assistant principal. I have 2 children in the Howard County public school system. Both of them go to Thunder Hill Elementary School, and we live in the Oakland Mills community. And I'm here tonight representing the Anti-Racist Education Alliance Incorporated, which was founded. It started as a movement in the teachers union at the time, giving space and voice to educators of color in the county. And when COVID hit and we were hit with the dual pandemics of racism and COVID-19, and we're seeing the civil unrest and the murdering of Black and brown bodies at the hands of police, that's what birthed the Anti-Racist Education Alliance Incorporated. Is now its mission is to make sure that we're decolonizing classrooms and we're dismantling white supremacy in our public school system. Thank you again for having me.
Well, thank you all for coming. As a fellow educator, I'm super excited for this moment. As you know, we have a Board of Education race that is happening. But before we talk about that, talk to me a little bit about what you think the 2 biggest issues that are impacting education, students, parents, communities surrounding education here in Howard County.
Are we going in the same order?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think there's a lot of misinformation about what we need, but what I personally see on a day-to-day basis is we need more resources for our students who can't succeed within the conventional school classroom setting. And there's only so much one teacher can do. And it's not just more money, it's a lot more comprehensive support for learners in an academic sense. The second thing, and I hope I'm not stealing people's answers, but the social emotional piece is just so huge right now. And, you know, Reservoir got locked down today after River Hill was twice in a week's time. And I messaged my principal, like, are we next? Like, are we going to talk about this? I mean, there's just so much to talk about that we could spend all day talking about, like, how many kids are high or depressed or potentially suicidal or hiding in bathrooms and skipping all their class. Like, it's overwhelming. And that's not even touching the academics part. So my condensed version is, you know, more academic support for people who can't access the material otherwise, and then more wraparound services, because that's where it should be anyway. You should have the services where the people are. So we should have more systems in place in our school system where the kids actually could utilize them.
So I think, to piggyback on Amy's second point, I feel like we have an educational system that is designed for students who we have outgrown, who have outgrown our system. Our students have little computers in their pockets that they're fairly addicted to. They learn in ways that that we don't necessarily teach anymore. They are much more sophisticated and yet not as mature. They really, really suffered during the pandemic from the separation from their friends and from their school, and really suffered terribly. And even if they don't show it, they lost a great deal during that pandemic separation. And we haven't figured out how to ameliorate that. And we're not really in schools having the time or the space to talk about it. We really need the space to think about what schools need to look like. And I really felt like this was going to be a time for us to think about redesigning schools. And I don't think we're doing that. We need people in education and on the board to challenge us to think about redesigning what education is going to be going forward. And it can't just be kids sitting in classes on laptops. That's not the answer. It has to be, like Amy said, deeply relational and deeply meeting the social and emotional needs of our kids. Two, it really is about money. Last May, we had $650 million in deferred capital maintenance. We also need to build more schools because we need people to move to Howard County. We have people moving to Howard County. We need more housing. We had that much deferred capital maintenance. And you know, like Dan says, we don't spend enough money on our lawn care. We don't spend enough money on the care of our buildings, cleaning them and those sorts of things. We need more technology in our buildings, all those sorts of things. And we need to pay our staffs better. I took, and this isn't about me, this isn't a complaint, I love my job, but I took a 5-figure pay cut to come from Baltimore City to Howard County. We are the sixth in the state, the 6th ranked paid staff. And we can't be the best school system in the state if we don't pay our staffs well, if we don't pay our faculties well. We need to do much, much better. All of these things, it is about money. We can't behave as if what we pay in taxes in Howard County is a fixed and perfect amount. We need to pay more for our schools. We need to spend more on our schools. We need to demand as Democrats that we invest much, much, much more money in our schools. We need to demand of our county council that we invest a lot more money in our schools.
I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. The only thing that I would add is, and I guess it is more of a piggyback and enhancement, is I feel like we missed an opportunity coming off of COVID to actually reimagine schools And I think that is the problem. We are continuing as a school system, a public school system, to put Band-Aids on things that should have been surgery. I think if there's anything that the pandemic taught us is that students, the opportunity gap is getting larger. And we are not making the type of investments in those, as Amy was saying, those wraparound services, making sure that children have access to mental health services, making sure that children have access to food. I sit on the board of Columbia Community Care, which was birthed out of the idea that there's a lot of food insecurity, and the only meal that students get sometimes is from the schools. I also want to double down on this idea of social emotional supports. The American Medical Association, I think, just published a report that says that all children ages 8 through 18 should be screened for anxiety. And a lot of that is because not just because of the pandemic, but other things that have that children are taking on that we don't even know that they're taking on. Those adverse childhood experiences have been great. And we have to address the ACEs. Before we can even start talking about the curriculum, we need to start addressing the ACEs. And while I'm on the topic of ACEs, we also want to talk about how an important issue in education is defending truth and protecting a sense of belonging and inclusion for our students. And so we don't want the public schools to be another adverse childhood experience for our kids. And that's what we see happening with 2 of the candidates who are running for school board. They will weaponize our classrooms by banning books that children can see themselves in and see into the experiences of other kids. They will continue to promulgate white supremacy by only teaching a portion of our history. So I think the biggest issue facing education now is this defense of truth. We are on the defensive to defend true history, to defend the identities of our students and the families that they come from. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
If I can piggyback on what Matthew said, I was in a meeting with the executive director of NAMI, Howard County, this week, and NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and she told me that the data is just out, and the #1 cause of fatalities in young people in Howard County this year is suicide, and these deaths are preventable. And the people, besides parents, who are on the front line of defense against these deaths are the people who work in our schools. And and these people are led by the policies written by the Board of Education. And that means, and I just saw a question in the chat, I think, the 2 people, I'm going to just say right out who the 2 people are who are going to ban books and who are going to, in my opinion, who are going to, not protect our LGBTQIA students and not stand up for truth, as Matthew so widely said. Tootie Adler and Lin Feng Chen are, in my opinion, and in my union's opinion, the candidates who are very dangerous to our LGBTQIA students and our students of color, and they're a real threat. There's a right-wing movement in this nation to privatize schools and to take away the rights of students. And Tootie Adler and Lin Feng Chen are funded by that movement, and they are part of that dangerous movement. And we really all need to be making sure we get out the word that Dan Neuberger and Jackie McCoy are the people to vote for. And that's, I hope it's okay that I'm making that personal endorsement here.
That is perfectly fine with me. I just wanted to take a moment to ask another question.
You said what I couldn't say in my capacity, Kelly, as president of a nonprofit. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. So as we look at Howard County itself, Howard County is at a crossroads, and our education system is also at a crossroads. I've heard it said that the idea between the barrier between the schools that we need and the schools that some right wing would design for us are these two Board of Education races. So tell me, why do you think this current Board of Education race is so pivotal for our future, for our schools and our community?
We're seeing how close these votes are already on our school board. So I think it's critical that we are prioritizing our students and their needs, and that includes school buildings, et cetera. If we have people who are voted in who don't make that a priority, or say that identity is not a contributing factor to one's educational experience, then they're not going to support anything that could be reflected in the budget. They're not going to be supporting, you know, it's a big deal that we have had Black History Month, and then also week, you know, that has been something that we've had materials throughout the school system that we've been able to have carry, and rainbow representatives. We now have people in central office whose sole purpose is to look at our diversity, equity, inclusion in a variety of ways, including our new Danielle Dupuy is in the LGBTQIA liaison role, which has never existed. So it's really easy to justify, well, budget cuts. So we're going to get rid of all the advocacy, all of the strides that we've made. I'm on the textbook review committee, and we have a huge number of books that are now available for teachers to use as anchor texts. And that's different than the books that are available in the library. So libraries are places where people can go and pick up a book and read it on their own. And the textbook review committee is focused on books that we can use for instructional purposes. So like everybody gets a copy. That's a ton of money that we're investing in those voices so that they can continue and reach wider and wider audiences. And folks like Jason Reynolds are getting banned across the country. And a lot of students who never see themselves in books will continue not to see themselves in books. So we have just started to turn a corner in Howard County. I was disappointed how old and white our literature was, and male-centric and Eurocentric. And I feel like for the first time in 8-9 years since I've been here, that things are starting to shift and teachers are more open to that. But even a book, you know, The Other Westmore, that I have taught in years past, that has now been pulled and it's under review. And I'm just concerned that it's just going to be too easy for people to want to go back after we've been fighting so hard to finally just shift the status quo to representing the people who are actually in our classrooms. And that's going to be hard to recover from. I think we saw the impact of Trump and how it set back and destroyed so many things that were finally helping people. I just can't imagine that happening in our district. And that's part of the problem, is nobody can imagine that happening. And it really could happen. Like we're so close. That's the part that I think people should be a way more nervous at how tenuous all of this is. It's very fragile.
Kelly or Matthew, who would like to take the question next?
Well, again, I mean, I'm going to steer it back to money again. And I know, like, all of these, the issues we've been talking about are very important, but a school system requires funds to run as well. And we need to have resources to give our kids the things they need. And it's amusing to see the depth of knowledge that Jackie McCoy and Dan Newberger possess versus their knowledge isn't amusing. It's amusing to see the contrast between the knowledge that Jackie and Dan possess versus the lack of knowledge that about the school system that the other two characters don't possess. They kind of give these very simple answers. So, well, yes, our kids need more mental health supports. We'll just hire more providers. There aren't more providers to hire, and we don't have the money in our budget to hire more providers. We need a bigger pot of money to hire more providers. We need a bigger pot of money to take care of our capital improvements. We need more money, and we need people on the Board of Education like Jackie, who's spent years and years and years actually working in a school system. We need folks on the board who know how schools work, which is Jackie McCoy. And we need someone like Dan, who is bound and determined to put all of the research that he's done about this school system into practice. And Dan is a strategic planner. He's spent his entire career being a strategic planner. He learned about leadership in the Navy, and he now is wanting to put his work, his career's work as a strategic planner into practice on the Board of Education. And we need a board that not just makes decisions one budget at a time, 1 year at a time, or one year at a time, one policy at a time, but we need them to start thinking 5 and 10 and 15 years down the road. And we have just not had that. This is why redistricting was such a disaster in 2019, frankly, because the district had not done it for so many years. And people acted like it was the end of the earth, and like the district boundaries or the school boundaries that had been there for several years were some kind of like naturally occurring God-drawn thing that couldn't be changed. And that's not the case. Just like the tax rates, the school boundaries are something that at some point a person created, and they can be changed. And our district really, really, really needs to get into the habit of being proactive and making long-term plans and sticking with those plans. And that's the kind of thing that Dan has planned, right? Making long-term plans and being strategic and sticking to them, and holding the superintendent accountable to making long-term plans and sticking to them. We really need folks who are going to do those kinds of things and do the learning and do the work. And we don't have people on the board who are doing that right now. They're much more reactive rather than proactive. And it's clearly not working, because we have a school system that's working okay, but it's not working as well as it should be for our students. And you see it in the schools, to be perfectly frank. You see it as a teacher every day in the system.
This board race is so important because it has the potential to set us back 2 administrations of board members, right? We have a new redistricting battle that's on the horizon we're coming up to, and those who are about to go onto the board will be faced with addressing the community and making sure that their questions are answered in regards to the redistricting fight. We have, as Amy has shared, the board votes are always split, razor thin. And when I think I can't help but bring up the fact that school resource officers were on the chopping block, and it came down to 1 vote, right? It came down to 1 vote. That when we had an opportunity to reimagine safety in our schools and provide those mental health supports instead of terrorizing our kids with school resource officers in our hallways, we made the choice to go back to normalcy and put school resources officers back in our high schools when they weren't in there during the pandemic because there were no kids in the hallways. And so this new board, or this Board of Education race, is so important because all of the anti-bias, all the anti-racist work that has been done in the county leading up to this point can be dismantled with 1 vote. And you know, Amy's been in the game a little longer than I have, but I think, and same with Kelly, not all of our colleagues came willingly on this journey of anti-bias and anti-racism. right? And so we don't want to take for granted what may happen if we have certain candidates win, that teachers would continue to fight to defend truth, fight to make sure that all of our children feel included and have a sense of belonging. They too might resort to their past biases. And so we need to make sure that the right candidates win in this election.
I just got a question about kind of what the components of reimagining schools would be. And that's a really interesting question. And I think, Matthew, do you want to take this?
Oh, sure. Okay. In my imagination, schools, wait, let me back up. So educators would be considered community educators, right? They would tap into the wealth of knowledge that communities bring. They would be bringing that into the classroom. My reimagining schools would be centering student voice, making sure that they're co-creators of learning in the classrooms. That we're not the sage on the stage, as they used to say in the old day, but we are, again, facilitating and having rich conversations. Reimagining schools would be a restorative school, and everyone would be in a restorative school. I understand the need to roll out and to pilot. I get it. We tend to ascribe business models to schools, and I'm not going to get on my soapbox about how that does not work.
Go there.
Because we're not producing a product. We are, instilling the future and making sure that students are equipped to be a part of this world and to be great community members. It would be a place where children are seen. All children are seen, whether it be on the bookshelves in classrooms, whether it be them being able to see educators that look like them, and them being empowered to see themselves as a part of this greater fabric and framework. It would be a school where we're not punitive, but we're teaching children what it means to interact with each other and what it means to build relationship, right? So we're moving from that punishment model, that three strikes you're out, that broken window type mentality, that criminalization that has come into our school system since, the 1950s. And we're getting back to what is about, it's about relationship. It's about repairing harm. It's not about you broke a rule. I should be able to go to my school and schedule a doctor's appointment if I want to, right? Right, I can't find a primary care provider. There's resources there at the school. I could go on and on. But that's what I feel it means by reimagining schools and what it could be. Teacher-led, okay. I'll
Matthew, I want to teach at your school, and the high school that's attached to your elementary school is a place where kids are, like you said, in charge of their own learning. But it's also a school where the community is deeply enmeshed in the school, and the school is deeply enmeshed in the community. And the kids aren't in the four walls of the school all day. The kids are out in the community doing their learning. I taught at a school kind of like this once, and it was very project based. So the kids were out in the school and out in the city. We spent a lot of time on the T in Boston, in that school, out in the city learning. And I think kids need to be in the school building a little less and outdoors and out in the community a little more. And I think there needs to be more freedom, especially I think there needs to be more freedom all the way through. I think kids sit down too much. And I think this is the solution to the cell phone problem. I think kids are asked to sit all day, and it's too passive, and it's frankly too boring. It was too boring when I was in school, and it's way too boring for our kids now. And I'm very exciting. I know you're all thinking right now, gosh, she's exciting, but I'm too boring and everyone else is too boring. And I think they need to be out and about more and up and moving more and out engaged in their world more and choosing what they're doing more. And then there was a question about redistricting.
Before we leave this, I just was going to say, I get frustrated. I had a AP say, I wish we could get rid of grades and wish we could be grade free. And I was like, me too. But it's really hard when you have a whole system built, you know, and it's a commodity to get good grades. And it's not just our walls. It's like after they graduate and we're like the last stop. So yeah, okay, whatever. So that's like a whole nother conversation, but that's not realistic. To have some of the magnet school models where you can really have that flexibility is tough. But within Oakland Mills, I've tried to do two of the things that were mentioned. One, we have the Scorpion Speaker Series, which some of you participated in or at least know about, where community members come in on Fridays and talk to 4 small groups, 80 kids each group, during each lunch block. So that's about 300 and some kids they get to meet with in the media center. And then they see them out in the community. They're like, oh, I saw it. Or it's their neighbor. Like they just never knew what their neighbor's job was. And it's been great because everybody's always kind of intimidated to come in because you're not allowed in schools unless you're like there for a specific reason or invited. And so to have them come in, especially people who are making decisions about our kids, is also very powerful because they see how awesome they are. So that's one thing that we've been doing for a few years now. But the second thing was we raised money just from like local folks and from alum to build an outdoor classroom space. And so that's a very vibrant alternative to sitting in the cafeteria or wandering the halls. And it's also a great place for teachers to go as a destination. But it's funny because it's such a huge cultural shift that some people don't even understand what it is. It's like literally tables and benches outside. So it's not like, what are these weird structures? Like they're things you sit on. And, you know, there's like a pergola around a stage and a walking labyrinth, and there are benches. And in addition to the ones that we purchased, we had things that were donated, and Nourishing Gardens came in, put in gardens, upcycled, made the benches. But why am I bringing this up? Because we have to interrupt some of the norms with like some seasoning so people can be like, oh, this actually tastes better. I was used to the bland stuff. And now that we have a little flavor, I realize this is not impossible. We don't have to wait. People seriously said, like, it's so awesome that Howard County built that outdoor classroom. Oh my gosh, not at all. They made it so difficult. But the fact that people can know and like something and then their expectations change, and they want their kids to have time outside every day, and they want to have spaces to meet as a community after school, or they want to come in and speak, and people actually want to be a part of the speaker series. So anyway, I think that systemic change is necessary and overwhelming at the same time. But if we can get people to be in the space that could, how do I want to say this? I kind of feel like it's like talking about meditation versus meditating, or talking about, you know, something. If you're talking about it, it's really hard to know how it's going to make you feel. It makes you feel good when you're in a speaker series where you can just raise your hand and be brave and ask a Muslim woman, you know, about prayer or why she wears a hijab, and for her to be like, thank you so much for that question. That's like the first time in their life they might have been able to do that. That feels really good to be in a relationship like that. And kids don't want to go outside at first because they're comfortable in their seats in the building and don't want to get up. And we go outside and one guy goes, oh, my skin feels so good. And you're like, because you're a human. Like, you're supposed to be out there. So I can't overstate or overemphasize how I do think that tiny shifts can really lead to a demand and an expectation for the larger shifts that both Matthew and Kelly just talked about.
Well, friends, oh my goodness, my mind is so full of so many amazing ideas. I know that all of you guys are really now understanding why we had to have these 3 power-packed educators come and speak about the state of education here in Howard County, and also this upcoming Board of Education race. Just as a reminder, we as a club have endorsed Jackie McCoy and Dan Newberger. And so we really, I'm going to put on my educator hat. As an educator, I really, 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 really need Dan and Jackie on the Board of Education so that we continue to uplift our children, so that we have people who are innovative enough so that we can move towards what our students really need. And we have the strategic mindset so that we're no longer planning minute by minute, day by day, but we're doing what we ask of our educators, which is to have a year-long plan, a multi-year-long plan, a plan for success for every school and every student for the long term, not just for today. So friends, I'd love it if you guys would give a big old round of applause to our amazing education forum. I wish we could have done this longer, but unfortunately we have to get to the business of the club. But from the bottom of my heart, I thank you guys for coming this evening.